Hi, this is Savannah,
And this is Brian from the Dorky Diva Show,
and you're listening to Star Wars.
the best place for below average Star Wars.
In a world where people need 80s and 90s movie reviews, two regular Geordies combine forces to bring you the Brother to Brother 80s and 90s movie review podcast. Check them out on Twitter, YouTube, and all decent podcast vendors.
Welcome to Star Wars, best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, the best place for below average Star Wars. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete,
And I'm Kat Reesielke.
and we are missing our pirate. Jason Hondoling will not be here today. He has lost all transmissions in the Outer Rim somewhere. Must be some sort of asteroid field going through where he is right now. So, Jason, if you're listening, we'll hope you get it sorted out soon, buddy, and we'll have you back on then. Kat, it's just me and you holding down the fort this week. Do you think we can do it?
I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle without our pirate, and I hope the hyperdrive doesn't go, but hopefully we'll fly through this.
Hopefully. I mean, if anything, what I would say is spinning is a good trick, so we'll just try that.
Wizard.
So, obviously, Book of Boba Fett, we are now up to Chapter 6, which is Episode 6 of the first season of the Book of Boba Fett TV series. We're going to deep dive review that now. It had a lot of sort of awesome things happening in it. So if you have not watched Chapter 6 of the Book of Boba Fett, we recommend pausing now, go watch it, then come back and then press play, because we're going to deep dive into all of the awesome stuff that happened. So it will be spoiled if you have not seen it already. Chapter 6, it is titled From the Desert Comes a Stranger. It's written by Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and it's directed by Dave Filoni. So this is the first episode to be written by someone else other than Jon Favreau. And obviously Jon Favreau is actually still one half of the writing team on it, but this is the first time someone else has been writing on this season, I believe. Kat, let's just dive straight in. What were your sort of your first, after this episode finished, what was your first thoughts going through your brain?
I think I was too gobsmacked to make coherent thoughts. I couldn't stop geeking out and like slack-jawed at my screen. That was how it felt after seeing that episode.
Yeah, I was smiling from ear to ear and didn't really have much to say. I was almost speechless. I've seen it 3 times today now, and just thinking about certain parts made us just smile and like almost have tears coming out just when you think about some of the beautiful scenes that we got in this episode. Let's start from the top. We start off on Tatooine. We start off in the Mos Pelgo area, where Marshal Cobb Vanth is still the Marshal of Mos Pelgo, now called Freetown. And he confronts some Pike Spice Runners, who seem to be picked somewhere in the middle of nowhere, so they can't be seen, but they have been seen. And sort of an interesting conversation goes down here, and then a shootout. What were your sort of first thoughts on the opening sequence, Kat?
Oh, I loved seeing Cobb Vanth back. I think it makes total sense to bring him in from The Mandalorian. And I suspect this could be maybe the areas written partly by Dave Filoni, because the strong Western vibes of this opening scene really are something that he would bring out. The confrontation it could have been taken from any classic Western film. It felt really natural for Tatooine. And although Cobb Vanth may have lost the armor, he is still a marshal, and he's still got all that authority and great hair. Still got the great hair. And I also liked how, they've made his costume now sort of quite cowboy style and quite Sheriff style. It sort of meets the two in the middle, and it's worn, but he hasn't lost any of that sort of gravitas that he did have when he wore the armor.
Definitely, it's almost like, if you're not good enough without the armor, you'll never be good enough with it. And obviously, he has a man who, he's every bit of the man he was when he had the armor to protect him, and here he is standing up for the people of Mos Pelgo. I love the conversation about how he was sort of give the Pikes the benefit of the doubt. He was like, whatever you're doing here, just pack up and go. And we don't have to have a problem. Put it down to, I think he said, put it down to looking at the map incorrectly. One of them decides to pull a gun. He shoots two of them very quickly, and then he shoots the third. And the fourth one, he says, "You're the clever one. Don't shoot." He tells him he can go, but he tells him now he wants him to leave the box that they're transporting. Take the money, but leave the box as a fine. The Pike says that's worth more than your town, and he says, "Maybe I'll retire." Jokingly, obviously he's not going to be on the take. He's not going to take it. He is just joking. And then I love the way he walks up after the Pikes left, and he sort of kicks the box open, and the spice is revealed, and then he knocks it over further, so the spice gets sort of blown away, so it can't be used. Proving that he is a sort of a good cop, a good-natured man. Yeah. What were your thoughts on the Pikes and sort of what they were doing?
Oh, he all had that sort of shady gangster vibe to it. And when they sort of huddle around a car to look at some kind of deal going down. And what I sort of really liked is the fact that the Pikes weren't saying anything. It was sort of all very hushed between them. And it was all through body language, which was really good because it did sort of lend a little bit of mystery to the fact that you didn't quite know what was going on in that scene until Cobb Vanth appears, and then you realise that the Pikes are trying to do this spice deal. But I think it almost suggests that although the Pikes are gaining influence on Tatooine, they still want to stay a bit under the radar.
Yeah, definitely. And they obviously don't understand the ways of the land, because I love the way he says, "You guys might not know where you are. You think you're in the middle of nowhere," and he points like in a broad direction. He says, "Everywhere from over there to everywhere over here," and points in our direction, is the Mos Pelgo territories, to which I'm the marshal of. So he's sort of given them a bit of a history lesson there.
Oh, definitely. He puts them in their place straight away.
I just love the sequences, it showed us that Cobb Vanth hasn't lost his touch since he lost the armor. He's still very fast on the trigger, and he's still a very proud man, and he will stand up for what's right for the people of Mos Pelgo. We then get this sort of the title screen, and then we jump straight to Din Djarin being inside the Naboo starfighter modified, and he's flying to a forested world to visit Grogu. And what I loved about this was when he was flying and something came from the sensors, I was like, oh my god, that's R2 straight away. And then when it cuts down to the planet and it is R2 with the sensor out, it reminded me of Empire Strikes Back when he's searching for Master Luke in the snow for any sort of signal.
Completely. I think that entire sequence was a love letter to Empire Strikes Back. And I was sat there thinking, no, he's not. Yes, he is. No, he's not. It was it almost was like too good to be true. I mean, surely we're not going to get R2 back again. And then we do, and it's just amazing. And again, it shows more of Din Djarin's character development. He is completely okay with talking to R2, even though he's a droid.
Because, I mean, I like how, he flies into the planet, he communicates with R2-D2. R2-D2 obviously must tell him where to land, give him the coordinates. So he lands, gets out the ship, and then R2-D2, he greets R2-D2 I think he calls him friend. I think he calls R2-D2 friend before he says that he's here to see Skywalker, and he's here to see the kid. And R2-D2 has called somebody to let them know he's here. R2-D2 tells him to essentially come with me. When R2-D2 was leading him to where he was going to lead him to, through the forest, there's a bit where like a rock comes over a hill. And I love the way this was shot, and I think this is Dave Filoni shooting it, because it's almost like a floating rock at first, to which I thought, oh, all the Jedi lifting rocks over there training, but then you find out it's actually a droid lifting it. But like the rock comes into view first before the spider droids. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did. I've had the exact same thought as you. I was really thinking, oh my gosh, there's a Padawan. There's someone with the Force behind there lifting that rock. And then it's like an ant droid. I'm calling them ant droids.
Yeah, I thought these were really cool, the androids. So it is a droid that's moving a rock, and then as R2D2 moves into the clearing, there's a lot of droids, and they're building huts. And this world is not Act 2, which is the ancient Jedi temple from The Last Jedi and the end of The Force Awakens, but this temple that's being built, reminiscence of the actual stone temples, the stone rooms that are on Act 2, in particular the one that Luke blows up when he sees Kylo and Rey touching hands, was what reminded me of sort of the architecture. So maybe Luke has been Act 2 already in his adventure, then left, and is using sort of the stuff he's seen there to try and replicate here. But yeah, sort of, you see R2D2 sort of speak to the spider droids the ant droid, sorry, as if he sort of commands them. I think one even nods at him, and he sort of instructs them to build a bench, and then R2 turns off. His old trick from The Force Awakens of turning off until he's needed. Mando even says, "Is that a bench?" And then he ends up sort of lying on it and going to sleep and having a rest. What were your thoughts on sort of R2 not leading Mando straight away to Luke and to Grogu?
I think R2 knows Luke. He's been with Luke now for ages, and I think he's probably learned his lesson from being dropped on Dagobah, not to mess with Luke when he's training himself or others with the Force. I think R2 knows to stay well clear of that. So I think it's partly that, and also he realizes that Luke probably just wants to be left alone to ruminate on the Force, because the reason they've come to this planet, which is not yet named, is because it's so isolated. Luke is deliberately seeking peace and quiet. So I think he knows that Din Djarin can't go to see Luke straight away. But I almost get the sense that it's like R2 innately knows. I don't think Luke needed to tell him that.
Yep. I like how we find out, obviously, Mando comes too. And it's like Ahsoka standing there, pulls a blaster out on Ahsoka, and R2's awake now. And you find out that R2's called Ahsoka. Maybe she was on the planet, maybe she was just passing by, but just made an effort to come down to speak to him. And she sort of references that as a family friend, and that's why R2 would have called her, which I thought was brilliant. When you think of the adventures that not only Ahsoka and Anakin had in the Clone Wars, but what Ahsoka and R2 had in the Clone Wars as well, and the fact that they're sort of back together here is fantastic. It really pulled on my sort of heartstrings a lot with that line when she did reference R2 as her being a family friend of R2 and the Skywalkers, almost as if R2 is a Skywalker.
That moment just had me absolutely screaming at the screen. I think it's a dream, has been a dream of so many fans, to see Ahsoka interact with Luke and R2 after sort of all the events of the Empire. And it was just, it was so understated the way that they did it. She just comes in and says, "I'm an old friend of the family," and it's culminated in that beautiful line. That's all she needs to say. All that history in that one line. And like you said, R2 is a part of that history. He's a part of that family. And it was completely unexpected. And I think it probably is my favourite part from the episode, is when she says that.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think in the Ahsoka novel by A.K. Johnson, I'm sure that obviously R2's in the company of Bail Organa, but I'm sure the droid's feeding Ahsoka information, and Bail's like, "Oh, like, why does the droid trust you?" type of thing.
I think you're right. It's in the end scene from that book where Ahsoka takes on the post of Fulcrum for Bail Organa, but she does have this little interaction with R2. I don't think they sort of give anything particularly much away at the end there, but yes, she has seen him since Anakin's turn to Darth Vader, but I think more Ahsoka and R2 is never a bad thing.
Definitely not. Obviously, Ahsoka and Mando have quite a long conversation. To take a walk, and Ahsoka talks to Mando about why he probably shouldn't see Grogu, but she will pass him on his gift. Do you want to take us through sort of what happens and your thoughts on it, Kat?
This was a very interesting scene because I think it shows some of Ahsoka's perhaps wariness that has come from everything she's experienced. She leads Din Djarin through basically a bamboo forest, and she speaks about how Mando is in a way possibly being selfish, that he wants to see Grogu, but Grogu doesn't necessarily benefit from seeing him. And Ahsoka basically asked Din Djarin who he's doing it for, himself or Grogu, and whether Grogu really needs to see him. And she sort of places this warning that Grogu's attachment to Din Djarin is already strong, so seeing him but not being able to go with him yet again might worsen that. And I think this probably comes from what she's seen during the Clone Wars, and particularly of Anakin. You know, she saw a fully trained Jedi become attached, not just to Padme. I mean, Anakin was attached to Obi-Wan, he was attached to Ahsoka, and she's seen what that has done to the best of the Jedi, let alone somebody as young as Grogu. So her warning definitely shows that Ahsoka now in this part of her life has become much more cautious, much more wary. She's not the snips we know from the Clone Wars. She's got a lot more wisdom behind her, and she's just trying to impart that wisdom. I almost got the sense that she's not necessarily fully on board with Luke training Grogu. I think she's come from an age where the Jedi took younglings at a very young age. You know, Ahsoka herself was very young when she became a Padawan. She's used to Jedi being trained from that young age. So to see, not only to meet Luke, who's been trained as a much older Jedi, but to see then him training older Padawans, it's sort of setting off all Ahsoka's warning bells, because this is not the Jedi way she's used to. And she's worried that, I think, it's all going to basically result in the same as what happened with Anakin. So it's oh, how do I put this? I think while Ahsoka is being wise, at the same time she is being a little frustrating, because I think Grogu would want to see Mando.
I think what her point of view is that, of course, I think she says Grogu misses you a lot, but like if Grogu chose to go with Luke, she makes a point of saying, I didn't train him because he didn't want to, but when Luke turned up, and Luke spoke to him using the Mind Force, like Grogu wanted to go, but he wanted permission from Mando. In that last scene of Mando season 2.
Yeah.
So Grogu's here for a reason. But it's like, if you go and see him now, yeah, Grogu might enjoy seeing you in that moment, but like after that, it's going to have a more of a negative influence than a positive. Be positive straight away, but then it's going to have a lot of negative where, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So yeah, I think some quite telling words there.
It also links a bit with I think it links with Dooku Jedi Lost in the fact that Dooku's family were on Sereno and he had to go as a Padawan to Sereno, and I'm sure he was sort of not exactly expressly forbidden, but the Jedi, Yoda and Cypher Dyas sort of warned him, don't go and see your family. They're not really supposed to see you now that you've become a Jedi.
Yeah, and again, because it'll be lovely when you see them, but then when you've got to leave them, you have to go through all of that again, like the heartbreak again, if you know what I mean. You could also make it almost like, don't text an ex. Do you know what I mean? Might be a good idea at the time, but it's only going to lead to more negative stuff in the future. I sort of things I love about this was I love the fact R2 called Ahsoka. I'm so glad that sort of Ahsoka and R2 had a really good chemistry that we know they have had from the Clone Wars, and from the Ahsoka novel in the Rebellion. I liked how Ahsoka was sort of looking out for Grogu in the long term, and also looking out for Luke. She also mentions that there's nowhere safer in the galaxy right now than right here with Luke. She refers to him as Master Luke as well. Sort of saying, accepting that he is a Master Jedi, which I think is also important. And I thought it was a lovely little scene, and I thought, when she talks to Din Djarin, and Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, saying he's a foundling, and she says, no, he might be a Padawan now. And he's like, either way, he needs to be protected, and that's why he's gone there. At the end of the day, he asked the armorer to make something to protect Grogu, and he's just going to make sure he gets it. Sort of after that, we sort of see the Grogu Luke Skywalker training scenes. Do you want to take us through sort of what your thoughts were on those, Kat?
Oh, again, this training is a love letter to The Empire Strikes Back and to A New Hope, because there's parts, particularly with the training remote, that's Obi-Wan and Luke's training aboard the Falcon in A New Hope. But then we sort of get a run through the forest with Grogu in what looks like the identical backpack that Luke carried Yoda in, and that is literally so similarly cut to the training scenes on Dagobah. So it's absolutely fabulous to watch. But I think my point on it is going to be a little bit controversial in the fact that I'm not convinced Luke is the greatest of teachers, because he lets that training remote zap poor baby Grogu. I mean, Grogu's a baby, and he does seem to expect quite a lot from him, even though Grogu is really young. So he's sort of trying to make him do like the Jedi balancing techniques and jumping techniques that he was learning on Dagobah. But it's a lot to expect from a young alien who can't even talk yet. And I do wonder if Luke was sort of pushing too far too soon.
I got the impression that I don't know, I would class that sort of basic training. I think the remote's not going to kill him. I think when Grogu does the first jump, obviously it's not very good. But I think Luke knows that Grogu has had training. He's just suppressed the memories. So I think, the very first time Grogu gets blasted with the remote, the second time, he does a lovely flip out of the way. So almost if he's waiting for that sort of reflex action to kick in. Now Grogu knows what the remote's going to do. I think he references to Ahsoka. He says, because I think she says, he's training very well. And I think Luke says, I think he's remembering more than training.
Oh yeah, we do get that memory scene with Grogu, which is, it's quite harrowing to watch that Order 66 again.
Yeah, do you think we see three? So obviously Luke and Baby Yoda, Grogu go for a walk. And I thought it was really cute when you see Luke lifting him with the Force, so he keeps up with him.
That was adorable.
On like 3 different occasions, was wonderful, very adorable. When Luke's talking about Yoda, and he says, "You remind me of someone, Yoda." And he's talking about Yoda, and he's like, "Where you're from? Like, do they speak in riddles like that?" He's trying to sort of jog his memory, asking questions about that. Luke says, "Do you want to remember?" And then Luke ends up sort of using the Force to help him remember. But the scene we get is sort of not Grogu's homeworld; it is the Jedi Temple, and it is the night of the Jedi Purge, and it is the 501st coming through the door, shooting 3 Jedi, and then coming for Grogu, and then he sort of blacks out. Do you think we're going to get sort of more, almost like the Bacta flashbacks for Boba Fett in the first few episodes of this series? Do you think we're going to get Luke and Grogu diving more into his memories since we piece together his past?
I think almost indefinitely, because it blacks out at the exact moment where it looks like the 501st are going to capture Grogu, and that leaves the massive question of, well, who saved Grogu? Who saved Grogu from the Jedi Temple? Was it another Jedi who's also then lying low? Was it a bounty hunter? Was it a senator? There's that massive question there. And the suppression that you talked about, I think, is absolutely key to this. Grogu is suppressing these traumatic memories. And I think in a way that's also what sort of suppresses perhaps some of his force powers, is he doesn't want to remember his force training, because that will immediately trigger these terrible memories of Order 66. So I think for Grogu to sort of remember, he's going to have to sort of basically deal with his trauma. But we need that question answered, because it's either going to be a character that we do know who saved him from the Jedi Temple, or it's going to be somebody who we don't know.
Definitely. Do you think it could be a clone whose chip didn't work?
It could well be. I mean, we know that during the time of Order 66 that Rex was with Ahsoka, so we know it can't be him. But yeah, it could be a bit like Fives, the chip wasn't working. So it could be sort of a clone gone AWOL. We do know that some Jedi survived. So it could be that maybe one managed to sneak him out. Maybe an older Padawan managed to sneak him out. But it's tantalizing us. It's teasing us, and Dave Filoni knows exactly what he's doing when he cuts things like this, because he knows it's going to open up so much fan speculation.
Definitely. I hope when season 3 of Mando comes that we do get Luke sort of doing more of this brain work with Grogu, when we get sort of piece what happened that night and in his past together, sort of episode by episode, with sort of flashbacks using this technique similar to the Bacta flashbacks for Boba Fett. Quick one before we move on. Am I right in thinking that did the Empire capture children from the temple to test them to be Inquisitors?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I know that the Grand Inquisitor was actually a Jedi Temple guard who they captured.
So I just wonder if they say the 501st capture Grogu and are going to transport him to the Inquisitor base, maybe sort of someone breaks him out on the way there or something.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, the 501st may have captured him, and that's sort of, why it then just sort of blacks out from there. Yeah, in which case it sort of then opens up that whole Inquisitor storyline. But I can't remember from the comics. I'm trying to remember, but I can't. I think they definitely took some power. I think they sort of took any Jedi who would surrender, basically.
Yeah. And obviously we know in the Rebels series when they are hunting down the children of the Force.
Yeah, they want those children with Force sensitivity to become the next Inquisitors.
And that's also a key point in the Jedi Fallen Order game, where they want the hologram order names.
Yeah. So that would make a lot of sense.
I loved the training montage when, after Grogu gets the grips with being able to jump properly and outrun the remote, and then he actually stops and destroys the remote as well using the Force, which I thought was cool. We then see him sort of balancing one-footed on a bamboo pole, and then we see Luke ignite the green and do some saber tactics, which these saber tactics that Luke was doing reminded me straight away of that scene in Star Wars Rebels when Ahsoka's watching the video of Anakin doing the training demonstration?
It did seem that very similar form, didn't it?
Yeah, so I think it was slightly different, but it just my memory went to that straight away. So it was a very similar form. And you know, they say Star Wars is poetry; it rhymes. And this was one of those where you saw sort of the son sort of doing what the father has done before.
Well, actually, I mean, there is a possibility that Ahsoka has that holocron.
Well, I would like to think that, you know, I mean, that's sort of the next topic. You know, we see Ahsoka and Luke having a chat. She mentions Luke's father. They obviously have a good bond. You know, Luke asks us for some advice. You know, how much has Ahsoka shared? I'd imagine a lot. And I imagine if Ahsoka does have holocrons left over in Jedi sort of knowledge, that she has passed it on to Luke so that he can make good use of it. Do you think?
I think that Ahsoka probably definitely sat down, lots of tea, probably a few Star Wars cakes, and gave Luke the whole Anakin 101 beginner's guide.
And they would have had R2 to back her up with most of the stories.
Absolutely, because he should be able to sort of bring it up all from his memory banks. He should have like recordings of some of it.
And I wonder what R2's thoughts were when he saw Naboo Starfighter land. Obviously, he used to fly one of those when he was, you know, when he was first made. He was owned by Naboo, and that was his job, was to maintain the Naboo spacecraft.
I suspect he was wondering where the droid port had gone.
Yeah, maybe he was relieved he doesn't have to go any more space battles.
Well, the thing is, Pelly has made that droid port into the exact size it needs to be for baby Grogu.
Oh, it's definitely a child seat for Grogu, 100%. Space child seat. Is there anything else you want to add about sort of the Luke Ahsoka Grogu scenes that we've discussed so far?
I think what I loved was the fact that Ahsoka sort of referenced Luke as a master, so she does see him as a Jedi, which is very important because Ahsoka doesn't identify as part of the Jedi Order anymore. So it definitely shows that she's got a deep respect for Luke, and that it's vice versa because Luke does ask her about Grogu's training. So he's sort of recognizing Ahsoka as basically superior in her knowledge of the Force. And in this timeline now, Ahsoka is almost a Yoda-like character. She's sort of become the mentor. She's gone from being the mentee of Anakin to sort of the mentor of Luke because she knows far more about the Force and the ways of the Jedi than Luke does. And I think, you know, seeing that progress of her character and in her interactions with Luke, it was just beautiful. And to see how far she's come from being that snippy Padawan of Anakin to this confidant of Luke.
I loved it when Luke asked her if you would see her again, and she was like, perhaps.
Do you think she got that maybe off Yoda, sort of the mic drop and just walk out, the very mysterious?
Definitely. 100%. We sort of end this sequence with Mando flies off and Grogu senses him leaving, and Grogu tells Luke that Mando's been there. So no, Grogu's trusting Luke with that information. And then we sort of go to Mando arriving back on Tatooine. What did you make of his arrival and landing in Jabba's palace and sort of the conversation that's happening at Jabba's palace?
The arrival back to Jabba's palace reminded me of episode 1 and sort of coming into the hangar bay on the Naboo palace. He took it at quite a speed. I'm surprised he managed to slow down enough to not crash land. And then immediately the Gamma Ring guard comes out protecting Boba Fett. He's sort of acting like a bouncer, and Din Djarin has to sort of prove his credentials before he can come anywhere near the Daima, which I found quite funny and a great sign of the Gamorrean's loyalty.
What I loved is that the sort of just by mentioning Fennec Shan, the Gamma let him past. So it's a bit like, could you just lie your way past these silly pigs, maybe.
Ooh, the thing is though, I don't think many people can claim to know Fennec because we know that she leaves basically a trail of bodies behind her. So if you've met Fennec and lived, you are basically her friend.
Yeah. I like when we get sort of in the war room, as we're going to call it. Sort of we have the debrief or the brief ahead of what's happening with the Pikes going on. Fennec's leading it. What did you make of sort of this sequence and who was there? You know, we had the mods there. We had Kuristan there. We had obviously Boba. We had the Gamorreans there, and we also had the Major Domo, I believe.
We did. It felt very tactical. All those red dots on the map of Tatooine, it was quite ominous because you can see now that the Pike force has gotten a lot bigger since that first transport arrived that the mods scouted. Yeah, the Major Domo's comment that Mok Shaiz went off on his holiday leave. Nobody asked for your opinion, mate. You are literally in shackles. I'm not quite convinced why Fennec even had him there. It sort of did lighten the mood a bit, that line. But the look, even Black Kersatan gave him a look of, why are you talking, prisoner?
Yeah. I think obviously it's a bit of an insurance policy. If the Nair comes back, they can use him as leverage, and also he might give them some information. Because I get the impression that he's loyal to the Nair right now, but if things fall apart, I think he would sell his soul to stay alive. So that might come in handy. Obviously setting us up for what's to come in the next episode. I feel this scene was. Then we sort of go. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of setting up the battle to come. What I found particularly interesting is the fact that Boba Fett, it's his only appearance in the episode, he doesn't speak. Yeah, I think that was quite deliberate because it's showing the trust he's putting in Fennec as his lieutenant and in the information she and the mods are providing. He is happy to go along with them. I think it's another sign of the teamwork they've been building.
Yeah, I know a lot's been said about Boba Fett and Holly and not being in the last episode and then only being in this episode once and no lines. But you got to remember, he only had a few lines in Empire Strikes Back and a few lines in Return of the Jedi. This is a character who is such a big character, but also has very little screen time and very little lines, like just typically. And we've got a lot of Boba in the first, 4 episodes. I think you're right. It shows not only he can't do this on his own. He needs not only does he need Fennec to help him, but like he needs muscle. He needs foot soldiers, which takes us to the next point. We have Mando says he can probably help with that, and he flies off to speak to Cobb Vanth. What did you make of sort of Mando and Cobb Vanth in this exchange and the whole thing with the deputy?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of tension between the two. They're both pretty tense and a little bit hostile towards another. And there's a little few digs that come from Cobb Vanth to Din Djarin. And it's a bit of a power play between them to see who's the more macho of the two. But I mean, Din Djarin is being very civil, and I like what he said. He said, "There's no easy way to ask for a favor," and for a Mandalorian, that's a pretty big deal. They're very independent people. They're used to basically doing everything by themselves. So for Mando to come and ask for help is a big deal, and I think Cobb Vanth understands that.
Yeah, I think Cobb Vanth. I think for starters, I think obviously Din Djarin lands, the sort of deputy sheriff or deputy marshal He's proven himself to be a little bit of a hothead here, which is going to come into play later. Setting him up as a hothead character who's just wanting to sort of be the man straight away. Obviously, Din Djarin goes for a drink with the marshal. He's talking about, you guys can be the foot soldiers, and the marshal's like, well, like me and you are even, so you can't just come in here and demand that we're going to be foot soldiers. And that's where Mando sort of regroups, and he's like, well, basically, mate, I'm asking you for a favour here, but it's hard to ask for a favour, so I was being a bit commanding. But essentially, I'm asking you for a favour because the Pikes are here, and it's causing trouble in Tatooine. And then, because Cobb Vanth had that altercation with the Pikes in the beginning, that's when he's like, I sort of see what you mean. I think if that altercation hadn't happened, Cobb Vanth would probably be like, I don't know what you're talking about, it's a no. But because he has witnessed that, he knows things are changing. So when Mando leaves, and he's like, we need to call a town meeting with all the able-bodied people, because he probably hasn't told them what he witnessed next to the moisture operators at the beginning of the episode, that the Pikes were there and they pulled a gun on him, tried to kill him, and they were transporting drugs. So it's sort of very real, and are going to be the Pikes are not going to stop, and they're going to keep coming through the Mos Pelgo region. So I think that's why he calls a meeting for the people to decide. Obviously, I think he'll tell the people what he's seen and let the people decide what they want to do. I don't think it'll be a forced thing, which is good. But yeah, I thought it was really good. I loved his line. I loved Cobb Vanth's line when he says, because when Mando's been a bit demanding, Cobb Vanth goes, "It's a good job you've got that lovely smile. Otherwise, like you wouldn't. It takes the edge off sort of demanding things of people, if you know what I mean."
Oh, that was a low blow, Cobb. That was a low blow.
But I think it was him just setting the tone, like, look, here, demanding things, and it's like, that's no, like, I like you, but we killed the dragon, but that was done. And that's what puts Mando in his place, when Mando goes, look, I'm trying to ask for a favour here, like, that's why I'm here, I'm asking for a favour. And Cobb's like, do you know what it is? We're all human. I sort of know what you're talking about. I'll tell the guys, and we'll see what the guys say. So he sort of, just lets them know that, look, I'm not here to be spoken to like that, but I am here to help. Let's all be sort of nice to each other here. Mando flies off, and then we have basically the title of the episode happens next, I would say, and we have "From the desert comes a stranger." So Cobb Vanth is sort of walking out. He's just said, we're going to have a town meeting, we're going to discuss it, and then you see sort of a figure in the distance, and Cobb Vanth spots him. And it's a stranger coming from the desert, as the title suggests of the episode. Cobb Vanth spots him, feels something's off, asks everybody to go indoors. There's a lovely shot where Cobb Vanth walks out into the street and the camera's like on his legs, and then through his legs you can see the character in the background who is wearing a trench coat and a cowboy hat, and is very tall and lanky, setting off extremely Clone Wars vibes, shall we say, to a world famous character. And then we have the deputy come out, who we've seen as a bit of a hothead, trying to prove himself. And Cobb Vanth's like, you need to go back inside. And then, Kat, do you want to talk us through what happens next in this scene and your thoughts on it?
So out of the desert haze comes the stranger. The way this was filmed, the cinematography was so clever, because for a moment it actually looks a bit like a Jedi, and then as the silhouette comes closer and closer, you can see more, and you can see the coat forming, the boots forming, and most importantly, the very wide brimmed hat. And let me tell you, I couldn't believe it when I actually started to see this. I was double guessing myself, thinking, no, they have not. But Dave Filoni most certainly did, and Cad Bane walks onto screen to stand off good, the bad, and the ugly style with Cobb Vanth.
Yeah, I thought this was magnificent. Sort of as the silhouette draws closer, you're sort of figuring out who it is, but you're almost not believing your own eyes. And then we finally get there, and they're having a conversation, and we found out this character, who is Cad Bane, is working for the Syndicate. He is working for the Pikes. And he says, ignore Boba Fett. So he's aware that Mando's been there. He's aware a conversation's been had. And he says, and he's obviously aware that Cobb Vanth probably killed a couple of Pikes. He says, tries to have a dig at Boba, says Boba is a cold-blooded killer who works for the Empire, which is true. All you need to do is not do anything, and we'll pay you the same as what Boba's going to pay you, and you don't have to do anything. Obviously, the deputy's out. He says the marshal's not for sale. The marshal's face, like Cobb Vanth's face, as soon as that guy speaks, he's a bit like, "Oh, like this is his Cobb Vanth's mind's now off the ball because he's worried about this guy on his left." And you can sort of see it in his face, he's a bit like, "I need to be fully concentrated on this guy in front of us right now, and I can't now because you went at the fray." I like how at that point, Cad Bane starts to get a bit threatening. And sort of, I think it's at this point where, we've seen his face, we've seen his mouth talk, and we've seen his hat, and we've seen his body, but that's when he lifts his head and you finally see the red eyes glaring, which again was brilliant cinematography. And sort of all sort of itching for their guns. And the deputy goes to pull his gun, and you see sort of the marshal look at the deputy and then looks to pull his, and Cad Bane ends up shooting him in the shoulder, it looks like, or just top of the chest maybe, once, and then Cad Bane also puts about 3 rounds at least in the deputy, killing him. What were your thoughts on the shootout and sort of how tense it was?
Oh, it could have come straight out of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It was a fantastic scene. You almost kind of knew what was going to happen, though, as soon as the deputy came out, because, yeah, he is a hothead, and he's clearly trigger happy. But Cad Bane is literally one of the best shots in Star Wars. I mean, that's how Boba Fett got the dent in his helmet from the deleted scene in the Clone Wars, is because of Cad Bane. So he's not somebody to mess with. You might think you're awesome. You might think you're a great deputy, but you don't go messing with Cad Bane. And there was almost like a mutual respect between Cad Bane and Cobb Vanth until Deputy came out. And I almost think that's sort of why Cad doesn't shoot to kill Cobb. Because, yeah, he unloads into the trigger-happy deputy, but I think he's only injured Cobb Vanth. I don't think he killed him.
Obviously, I'm glad you brought that up from the Clone Wars. Obviously, Boba and Cad Bane have a history. So do you think Cad Bane is sort of working for the Pikes, A, for the money, but also to get sort of some revenge on Boba here?
I think he's trying to get revenge twofold, because he's also got a history with Fennec Shand from the Bad Batch. So he's got a double vendetta here of, yeah, he tried to take Boba Fett sort of as a young bounty hunter to train. That didn't end well because they've got different moral codes. And then during the Bad Batch, both Fennec and Cad Bane are after Omega. And like any good bounty hunter, Fennec isn't going to give up her bounty, so she ends up fighting Cad Bane. So there's a lot of history between all 3 of those characters.
And obviously, a great opportunity for Cad, get paid and get revenge. Sort of, it's a nice double winner for him.
Yeah, because Cad Bane does have quite a lot of personal motives. A lot of the time during the Clone Wars, yeah, he does things for money, but if he can get revenge on the Jedi or anybody who's slighted him, he will do it.
It goes to show the Pikes are bringing the big guns in. The fact that they've brought Cad Bane in to sort this out shows that they're taking it very seriously. I like the fact sort of Cad Bane, yep, he shoots Cobb Vanth once, you got to respect, disarms him. I think he's probably still alive. Then he sort of very calmly puts his blaster away, tells the whole town, if you just do nothing, then nothing else will happen. So, the threat's there now. But I imagine Cobb Vanth will take this as, we're going to war once I'm better. and obviously he just walks back off into the sunset, into the desert. To which we then go to the end of the episode. We go back to this forest planet. Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple hut has been built by those ant droids, as you call them, Kat. And to me, again, the architecture is very much like the architecture on Acto of the ancient Jedi temples. So again, maybe Luke's been then seen those, then come away, and then goes back there in exile later. And I don't think this is his temple that we see in the flashback sequences from the sequels, and I don't think it's the temple we see in the comic series The Rise of Kylo Ren, because there seems to be more forest, although could cut forest, I suppose, but also the buildings, like Luke's temple is a bit more modern, that we see in the flashbacks, I believe, in the sequels. So maybe this was just somewhere where he was building a sort of a mock temple to start with, maybe. What were your thoughts on the hut being finished and sort of the aesthetic of it?
Yeah, it feels like a Kickstarter for the main event. In the fact that, yeah, this definitely doesn't look like the same planet or buildings that we see in The Rise of Kylo Ren or Luke's flashbacks during the sequels. But having that link to the Last Jedi was really cool. Yeah, either Luke has been to Ahch-To already, or he may already be in possession of some of the Jedi texts, and maybe there's drawings perhaps in them of what like traditional Jedi temples look like, and that's why he's built it in this conical egg-like shape. It's very traditional, and I think it's like Luke's message that he wants to honor the Jedi and the lineage, all the history that comes with the Jedi, by using this older architecture. And it's also like a natural part of the land, because even when, say he leaves that temple, like if it fell down, it would just become rocks. The rocks would be covered in moss. The moss would lead to trees. It's that balance in the Force almost. And there's nothing sort of being destroyed to make the temple. It's very sort of one with nature, and that's very much sort of part of the Jedi way. So it's being respectful to nature, which I think is good building planning.
Yeah, I think for me, what this showed was, we had the Naboo starfighter, and Ahsoka Tano, which is sort of showing us our prequel storytelling from the prequels. The fact we have Luke Skywalker and Boba Fett, that's sort of our original trilogy. And then I thought with this architecture here, it's very much the architecture that we've seen in the sequel trilogy of the ancient Jedi temples on Acto. So it's sort of tying everything in together, tying all three trilogies in with imagery is what the feeling I got was, which I think can be a very simple thing to do and very powerful and subtle. And the way Dave Filoni done it is fantastic, I thought. Let's get to the big question, sort of the cliffhanger of the episode. Obviously, the temple's built, or this hut of the temple is built. Luke and Grogu are inside the temple, sort of meditating. Luke says, "The Mandalorian came. He brought you a present. I'll show you it." He shows him it, but then he also says, "I've got something else to show you." He pulls out a lightsaber. It's Yoda's lightsaber. I was almost like, "Is that Yoda's lightsaber?" And then Luke actually comes out and says it was Yoda's, and tells Grogu that he can, he's got a choice. He can take the gift from the Mandalorian, which is the body armor, the chainmail made out of Beskar, which reminded me a lot of Frodo and the Mithril vest from Fellowship of the Ring, which obviously Dave Filoni loves Lord of the Rings, so that's probably where he got that imagery from. Again, sort of Star Wars' poetry. Star Wars ties in from its creators' childhood and creators' things that the creators enjoy. Or, and if he chooses that, that's fine. And Luke will take him back to the Mandalorian where he can stay with him. Or, if Grogu wants to become the first student and become a great Jedi, then to choose the lightsaber. And then Luke will help him on that journey. What were your thoughts firstly on the fact it's Yoda's lightsaber, and then secondly on the question that was posed.
Firstly, on Yoda's lightsaber, the big question is, where did Luke get it? Because the last time we saw Yoda's lightsaber, it was dropping a very long way down in the Senate. And that's the last we saw of it. So, has he got it from one of Palpatine's stashes? Did Doc Ondar from Batuu manage to get hold of it? Bit of a question there, and I hope we get a story there, because Maz Kanata didn't deliver on her story about Luke's lightsaber, so we need answers about Yoda's. And then secondly, on the big question, it didn't. I must admit, this didn't sit particularly right with me, because Luke has just given Grogu an ultimatum, and Obi-Wan said, ultimatums are the way of the Sith. And it just didn't feel quite right for me for Luke to be setting this ultimatum to a child. It seemed a bit harsh.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have to get. Grogu has been to the Jedi Temple. He has had some training. He is 50 years old. So although he looks like a child, he's not a child. Like, Luke doesn't necessarily treat him as a child, if that makes sense. I do get what you mean about the ultimatum. I think it's more of a. I don't think it's you can never have this item from the Mandalorian. I think what Luke's after is like, you've got a choice to make whether you want to be here with me or whether you want to be with the Mando, and it's you can leave. It's not a prison. Like, do you know what I mean? But like, if you're gonna stay and learn the ways of the Force, I do need some commitment from you, and I can, the way, the way Grogu looks at the starfighter as it takes off, and obviously Grogu tells Luke in that moment, "Oh, Mando's here," and Luke can feel sort of the thing. I think Luke's saying, you can go back to Mando. It's not a problem. But the other choice is to stay here, and you might see the Mando again in the future, but you might not. And then I love this line where he says, "The problem that you've got, Grogu, is that what's only a short amount of time in your life is a lifetime for others." And it's sort of that curse that Wolverine has in the X-Men universe, where he's immortal, so he'll never die. So if he has a wife and kids, he'll outlive them because his body regenerates. So you'll see his family come to life, and then he'll see his family die, and then he'll just be left over. And it's this thing again, Grogu, you're 50. It's probably going to be another 50 years until you're, maybe Yoda size. But by that point, the Mando's going to be dead. Luke Skywalker will be dead. But he'll be left because he's going to live till he's 900. So I think it's again just putting things in perspective for him, is to say, it's not an easy path. But if you want to stay, sort of, you can. But I think he phrases it in a very Jedi way. But I would like to think down the line, Luke would be, I can see them getting caught the worms later, and Luke going, "Here, put the armor on. It was made for you. Put this on. Keep yourself safe. Let's go and use our lightsabers and save people." Do you think that they'll? It ends on a cliffhanger. Grogu doesn't choose. Which one do you think Grogu's going to choose, Kat?
Yeah, I'm not convinced it's possible to predict. I want him to choose the chainmail armor. I want him to go back to Din Djarin, because I think they're not right without each other. And Grogu has this longing for being back with the Mando, because he does have this strong attachment, which I think Luke does have to be respectful of, because, Luke hasn't given up his attachments as a Jedi. He's still attached to Han, he's still attached to Leia. Ben will be alive at this point. So I think Luke would have to be respectful if Grogu chose attachment over the Jedi sort of way.
Yeah, well, I think Luke gives him the choice, and Luke's like, whichever. I think Luke will drop him off. I think Luke will take him. Like, "Okay, buddy, you want to go? I'll take you there, no problem." I think But I think what Luke's saying is that, like, you might not see your friends as much as you would think. Like, Luke doesn't see Han and Leia much now, between
Mm.
now and the way they end, if you know what I mean. That's because it's a hard life. And I think, again, I don't think Luke's saying you're choosing it's between me and the Mandalorian. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's more of a, I need your commitment right here and now. But if you don't want to be here, I can take you wherever you want to go. And, like, down the line, hopefully you will meet Mando again. But and if you do, fantastic. But also, life has a way of not letting you do that, which Luke's learned all too well from. Meets back up with Biggs dog like that for like one battle, then Biggs dies. Like, do you know what I mean? Luke never knew his father, never knew his mother. Luke gets to know Obi-Wan Kenobi for like a tiny bit before Kenobi's taken away from him, although he does get to know more as a Force ghost. But I think it's just those lessons that Luke's learned. It's a case of like it's absolutely fine for you to miss Mando, and you might see him again, but also, you might not, because, again, like, you're going to outlive everybody. So again, what's a short time period for Grogu could be someone's entire lifespan. I think he'll choose the lightsaber, just because I think everything he's done so far. He chose to go with Luke. He was doing the training. I think if he went back to Mando now, he'd be pretty useless. Like, we'd have to like watch the kid while fighting, and it's a big war coming up, as we've heard with the Pikes. So I think he'll stay with Luke for now, get trained up, but doesn't mean he's going to stay with Luke forever. And as we know, in the comic book, The Rise of Kylo Ren, Grogu's nowhere to be seen in that book. So is it a case of Grogu's already sort of left the temple at that point, to go off on his own adventures or rejoin with the Mandalorian? What do you think about any of that?
Yeah, because he isn't in the Rise of Kylo Ren comics at all, so they do have to explain his absence in some way, which would make sense is if he chose the armor to go back to Din. And it's such a big decision for a really young person. And I think the point there you make about the immortality, near immortality of Grogu, that might influence his choice, because he may think, well, my time is better spent with Din Djarin whilst I have him now. Technically he could learn the ways of the Force afterwards by himself, maybe once he's older and wiser. So it's like impossible to predict what's going on in Grogu's head. It's just a massive decision for a little guy.
It is indeed. It is indeed. That brings us to the end of the episode. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
The flying frogs.
Yes.
I think we do definitely need to talk about the flying frogs briefly, and just sort of that interaction between Luke and Grogu.
So I love this because, obviously, Grogu, they're meditating, and then Grogu notices a frog and he uses the Force to get the frog, and he's about to eat it. Luke sort of opens his eyes, and Grogu sort of lets go of the frog. Is that right?
He does. He drops his frog straight away.
And then Luke's a bit like, well, if you keep learning the ways of the Force, because Luke pulls all the frogs out, and he's a bit like, if you keep learning the ways of the Force, you can use it to get all the frogs. Do you know what I mean?
It did. It sort of felt like the inverse of The Empire Strikes Back, when Yoda lifts up the entirety of Luke's X-Wing, whereas Luke can only manage like the wing. And also the puppeteering of Baby Yoda at that point, the way they made his eyes go so big in wonder at what Luke was doing, it was just such a cute moment.
Yeah, and I thought Luke's face as well, the way you could tell Luke was enjoying sort of making it a bit fun for him, which I thought was good, sort of trying to be a fun teacher. Another thing, the whole Grogu training montage, I thought, some of that's a puppet and some of it's CGI, but like you could not tell where the blend was. It was just so seamless. The guys really have got Grogu down to a T. I think how they animate him, and like the CGI version and the puppet version. like I said, the things they've got Grogu doing, it just looks so realistic and so real and so natural. But you know, you can tell a lot of puppetry went into that, a lot of CGI trickery went into that, but you couldn't tell. It was just seamless. I thought that was really, really good.
Absolutely, and the digital de-aging as well on Luke, I thought was much more polished compared to the finale of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, well, I think last time it was a pure de-aging process last time, where I think this time they've hired the deep fake specialist. Since then, I think, and obviously, you know, I think it's a bit of de-aging and it's a bit of deep fake. I think the only time it looked a bit off for me was when the shot Luke from his left but all right. I wouldn't say off, but you could sort of tell it was a bit different. Where when they shot him from the other side, where Mark Hamill's scars on the mole is, that looked a lot more like Luke when they shot from that side. But overall, it was just fantastic, and the things that had Luke doing, and the voice by Mark Hamill, to me, it was Luke Skywalker. Absolutely, loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It was Luke Skywalker in that moment. You couldn't. You would just. You're sort of almost glossing over perhaps like the times where perhaps it didn't look quite like him, because you just get so sucked into that moment and that nostalgia. And I love these sort of they've given Luke's new Jedi robes as well, which look very Japanese, very samurai. That simple sash, all black, carrying on from Return of the Jedi. It's the Luke we know, and yet it's the Luke we don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why I loved sort of, you know, like, what is Luke Skywalker doing after Return of the Jedi, and that's what we're finding out here, which is fantastic. I did love when he's running with Grogu, and I think it does look like the exact same pack that Luke had Yoda in on Dagobah.
It is just so so much nostalgia. You know, Yoda was in that backpack, Grogu's in that backpack. You can't get any more classic characters in that backpack. Which also meant that Luke kept it after all this time, and I think he put it through the wash before putting Grogu in it, because it's much cleaner than it was on Dagobah.
Definitely. I think for me, one of my favorite things about the episode was, I think, you know, there's people speculating about like one of these characters being in the episode, but the fact we got them all, we got Cobb Vanth, we got Ahsoka, we got Luke Skywalker, we got Grogu, we got Cad Bane. You know, people are speculating about one of them maybe, but we got all 5 in this episode. Again, it's absolutely sort of fantastic. It's almost like it's the Book of Star Wars. It's sort of telling this journey of Star Wars post Return of the Jedi. Which again I just think is absolutely wonderful. Yes, there was no Boba Fett in the last episode. Yes, there was hardly any Boba Fett in this episode, but we got a lot of Boba Fett in the previous episodes, and I'm sure we're going to get him in the next episode. And I'm sure there'll be more series down the line where Boba will show up in other people's shows and have some time as well. So I'm not overly concerned about that.
Major kudos to everybody in the production team for managing to keep this episode under wraps and keeping all these incredible cameos an absolute surprise.
Definitely. And for me, on Yoda's lightsaber, I wonder if maybe Palpatine had it found and kept hold of it as like a trophy, because we both know Palpatine's a bit like that. I know that the on Coruscant they burnt a lot of the lightsabers in the Jedi memorabilia, but that one's a special one where you can see Palpatine being like, "I beat him, my little green friend. I'm going to keep that as a trophy." Or maybe it got found and was on the black market. We do know reading the Aftermath trilogy that, you know, there is sort of Sith and Jedi artifacts going on the black market, lightsabers and things like that. So has someone else just found it, or, you know, was it in one of the Emperor's observatories, like we see in the game Battlefront 2 when Luke goes to Pelio and steals the compass? We know from Battlefront 2, and we know from the comic book series Shattered Empire, that Luke goes to quite a few of the Emperor's observatories, sort of looking to steal not just Jedi artifacts, but things to do with the Force. So maybe he finds them.
Yeah. Or one other possibility I thought of is, does Yoda tell Bail that he dropped the lightsaber, and does Bail Organa send someone to try and retrieve it before it can fall into the wrong hands.
Maybe. I think for me, I can't see Yoda having it because I always took it as, we got the original trilogy first. Yoda doesn't have a lightsaber. We then get the prequels. Attack the Clones comes out. Yoda has a lightsaber. It's like, oh well, why doesn't he have it in Empire Strikes Back? But then in Revenge of the Sith, we see him drop it. So it sort of ties that up. So I don't think he would have found it and left with the lightsaber because I think we would have seen it in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. So I think it has come from a third party here. So again, as you said, we didn't get the story about how Luke's lightsaber ended up at Maz Kanata's castle, which we all want to know, but we also want to know about how Yoda's lightsaber ended up in Luke Skywalker's hand.
Big questions that we need answers to.
Indeed. Do you think we'll get the continuation of Luke and Grogu in the next episode, or do you think we'll get it in The Mandalorian Season 3?
Every time I've tried to predict the next episode, I've been totally wrong. I would like to say that I think the finale is going to mainly focus on Boba Fett because he's at war with the Pikes. So it should, in theory, just focus on Fett and the gang beating up the Pikes. But there could be maybe a cutscene with Luke and Grogu. I think for The Mandalorian Season 3, it's definitely got to be part of the main storyline. Yet at the same time, I would love it if they maybe did a comic of Luke and Grogu, the comic.
Definitely. I think for me, I was not expecting to get as much Grogu and Luke. I mean, I wasn't expecting any Luke. So, when we first saw R2-D2, I was like, oh my God, we're going here. I sort of had a smile across my face the whole episode, speechless at the end. And then when I was thinking about the episode, when I wasn't watching it, I was a bit like, almost had tears come to my eyes, just like how magical seeing Luke Skywalker with Grogu and with R2 and with Ahsoka was. Like I said, almost tears twice, and I've been thinking about it. The episode's absolutely fantastic. I think it's just a masterful piece of storytelling. It doesn't have any big battles or big set pieces. It's just beautiful story.
Yeah, magic is the way to describe this episode. It is pure Star Wars storytelling at its best.
One of the things for me, so at Star Wars Celebration Europe in London in 2016, I met Dave Filoni, and I asked him about Cad Bane, about if there's a chance of him sort of coming back into storytelling. And, he paused, he thought about the question, which was nice of him. He's a bit like, He's like, maybe. And do you know what I mean? But obviously, back then this show wasn't in production, but it goes to show that even in his mind, Cad Bane's been a big part of it, as well as it has been ours. And then he's had the opportunity to bring him back in here naturally, and he's pulled the trigger. And again, he's done that. He's introduced Cad Bane masterfully even. What do you think we'll see next from Cad Bane? Oh,
well, maybe we've got you to thank for Cad Bane. Right, there we go. I think Cad Bane is going to be the serious threat here because he may be one Duros. He's a Duros, isn't he? Is that what they call them?
Yes, I believe, yeah.
But he is extremely dangerous. He walks into Freetown and he's one person against the whole town. And it just shows how dangerous he is. He's going to be the main antagonist against Fett and Fennec Shand. So I do wonder if he's going to perhaps try infiltrating the palace and maybe trying to take Fennec or Boba Fett out. We know that sort of that we've seen him infiltrate the Senate, even the Jedi Temple. So I think that's totally something he could do.
He's definitely done his homework because he says a line to Cobb Vanth where he says, "You should have kept the armor, or you should never have given the armor up."
Yeah, he knows obviously how durable and how strong Beskar is, because of his duel with a much younger Boba Fett. So Cobb Vanth is vulnerable, whereas Boba Fett is protected.
Yeah. But I just think the fact that Cad Bane knows that Cobb Vanth had the armor, so he knows that part of the timeline. He knows that history.
Yeah, so I mean, it asks the question of, how long has he been on Tatooine watching things?
Yep. Or who's giving them information? Obviously, we didn't see any droid friends, but we do know that Cad Bane does sometimes have a droid friend looking out for him.
Yeah, that could definitely be sort of his little spy droid, keeping tabs on everybody.
Do you think we'll get a total 360 in the next episode?
Oh, wow, I mean, he was often with Cad Bane in the Clone Wars, so that is total possibility.
What are your hopes for the next episode, Kat?
Standoff between Boba Fett, Fennec Shand, and Cad Bane. I want to see these vendettas out in the open.
I want to see Coruscant just ripping Pike's heads off and arms off and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, and maybe Boba Fett finally on the Rancor.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. I'm glad, obviously, we've teased that. So we're going to see him riding into town. Maybe that'll be after they vanquish the Pikes. You'll like ride in for a victory lap in the town.
That would be seriously cool.
One thing we haven't spoke about, which is actually probably the major plot point of this episode, is two Pikes walk into the sanctuary and blow it up.
Oh my gosh! Oh, I was sitting there, and when that happened, when they left the ice cream machine, I can't remember what they call them. In the Star Wars universe, when they got up, and I was like, why are they leaving their cylinder there? And then I was like, I yelled at the screen, it's a bomb, and then it went off.
Yeah, so I mean, when they first came in, I thought, oh, they had to cause trouble, but then they ordered some drinks. Then the Twi'leks came over, and they didn't want to have the helmets serviced, and then they got up and left, and I was like, oh, like they're just taking the mickey here. But then when the droid was like, oh, you've left, I think it's a Cantana, I think he calls it, the storage unit,
Right.
for money and Beskar and stuff. I think he says you've left your Cantana. As soon as that, I was like, oh god, this is a hit. Obviously the bomb goes off and like it does some serious damage. But I was a bit like, oh, that's the Pike sort of saying, Boba Fett said he would protect you, because he did tell her that when he first went in, let you know that you've got my protection and business will go on like normal. But guess what? Boba can't protect you. We're the Pikes, and we've just blew your business up. And that's going to send a strong message all over Mos Espa.
Yeah, I mean that's the spark that's going to light the war now. I just hope that Garsa Fwip and Max Reba are okay. You can't kill like the most stylish Twi'lek in the galaxy. Please, no.
I'm not worried about her because I don't really. I think she'd sell Boba out anyway. But I did notice that when it showed you the band playing, it didn't show you Max Rebo, so maybe it was Max's day off.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so, because Max has already been through quite a few tight scrapes. He's very good at knowing when not to be places. It's like he knows when they're going to blow up. Maybe that's something his species can sense.
Perhaps, but yeah, I didn't notice him there. And usually when he's there, they do focus on him, but it focused on the astromech droid drummer, and we had one of the what they call it, other bishes, what they called the
Biff.
In one of those playing the clarinet or whatever it is. So it focused on two band members, which was not Max Rebo. So maybe Max Rebo survives to live another day, hopefully. Do you think this will put Garsa Fwip in a position where she sides with the Pikes now? If she survived?
No, I think, I mean, the Pikes have deliberately singled her out. So if anything, it might tighten her loyalty to Boba Fett, because I would hardly trust somebody who just blew up my beautiful establishment.
Do you think she survived?
Oh, I really hope so, because
it was a pretty big blast.
I was enjoying all her gorgeous costumes, and I would be really upset if she doesn't make it, and I'm not going to see any more Star Wars Vogue. That would be pretty heartbreaking.
I hope she doesn't side with the Pikes. I'll tell you who I do think will side with them. That dodgy water dealer.
Oh, 100%. He's probably already providing water for them.
Yeah, he probably showed them how to get the bomb inside the sanctuary.
Oh, yeah, I think you're going to actually probably have sort of that. You're going to have the war with the Pikes, but you're almost going to have sort of a civil war of the people in Mos
Espa.
Espa, yeah. Oh, my brain is sizzled. Because you're going to have people who are siding with Boba Fett, but then you're going to have people siding with the Pikes. So it's going to get ugly.
I think so, because even if they didn't want to side with the Pikes now, it's a bit like, well, you couldn't protect us from the Pikes, Boba, because we've just seen the explosion. So now we're going to have to side with the Pikes just to save our own skins. So it's sort of a big power play by the Pikes, that was. I think next episode for me, I think, hopefully Cobb Vanth isn't dead. I can see him now being like, there's a big problem with these Pikes and we need to stand up against it. I don't think the fear factor of what the Pikes in Cad Bane try to put on Mos Pelgo is going to work. And again, I think Cobb Vanth's going to come help. I think you're going to have the people of Mos Espa torn because of that explosion about whether they just side with the Pikes or whether they trust Boba Fett now, because Boba has essentially let them down almost, because he promised them they'd be safe, but a big bomb blast has just gone off under his watch. If you look at it in real life, Pablo Escobar in Colombia, especially in Medellin, the police were after him all the time, the government were after him, but the people in Medellin would often hide and protect him, wouldn't cooperate because he would give them a lot of money, help the homeless, all kinds of that. But he went a bit nuts and he started setting car bombs off and innocents got hurt. And that's when he sort of, people didn't trust him anymore, and that was part of his big downfall. So here, although Boba didn't set the bombs himself, but they've sort of happened on his watch. So you're going to have the people sort of, their trust in Boba's going to be diminished a bit now. He's not reliable anymore. So, yeah. And Boba, does he need to strike back? He does, but like, where do you strike back? Where are the Pikes based? They've infiltrated most of Mos Eisley by the looks of it, and now Mos Espa. So, yeah, very, very complicated things going into the next episode. Do you think if Boba Fett wins, do you think he'll take over the spice trade, or do you think that's something he'll just get rid of?
No, it's definitely something he would get rid of, because we know from the interaction between the Pikes and the Tuskens that Boba Fett was very against spice trading. So no, it goes against his code. So I think he would just completely abolish it.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts on this episode in the series so far, Kat?
Just, I think the most incredible episode that we've had from the Book of Boba Fett. It left me completely speechless, and I haven't stopped geeking out about it. And there is just so much to wrap up in this finale that it's going to be explosive.
Yeah. For me, I thought this episode was pure Star Wars euphoria. I said I've watched it 3 times, each time speechless, just with a smile across my face. Just pure feelings of joy. And like I said, when I actually sit and think about the episode, I almost get like happy tears of getting to see Luke Skywalker and Grogu and Ahsoka doing what they were doing. Again, as I said, I love the fact we got the sort of the Naboo starfighter in Ahsoka from the prequel era. Got Luke and Boba Fett, and sort of we're living in this sort of original trilogy era just after it. And then again, we had sort of the design aesthetic of the Jedi temples as seen in Acto in the sequels. And I think, we're essentially getting this linear storytelling where, the series might be called Boba Fett, but it's continuing the story set up in the Mandalorian series. And I think when the Ahsoka series come, that'll do the same. If they reignite the Rangers of the New Republic series, that'll do the same. Where, it's called a certain title and it'll feature those characters, but it's going to forward the entire narrative going forward. and I think it will build towards the First Order and what that first looks like. I think. One last thing for me is obviously, we saw Cad Bane, so we saw the Duros in action. Obviously, there is a Duros in Battlefront 2 who is with the Rebellion and becomes the New Republic. I can't remember his name, but we could see him in the Rangers of the New Republic. Obviously, if we can't have Cara Dune anymore, we could focus it around him. Do you remember his name?
I have not actually played Battlefront 2, so I wouldn't know.
So he works with Lando Calrissian a bit, and he works with Inferno Squadron when they defect to the Rebellion, to the New Republic. So, I mean, can we just talk about the Duros visual effects? I couldn't tell.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to as well.
I couldn't tell. I thought it looked fantastic. I couldn't tell if it was like prosthetics or CGI. And again, it was probably a mix of the both, just blended so well. But what was your sort of first thoughts? I thought the teeth, very pointy, very sort of evil. And then when we finally see the red eyes, I was like, oh God, this guy means business.
The costume department did an absolutely incredible job. I mean, he looks basically exactly like he does in the Clone Wars. The mix of, I think, CGI and real effects, I really want to know how they did it. Looking at the images, it looks like I think the teeth are real. Those are false pointy teeth, which don't look very comfortable to wear at all. I think then we've got a prosthetic like head, which then melds with the neck. So there's like face paint to get that effect of the blue skin. I think the only thing that was CGI was his eyes, those red glowing eyes.
Yeah, those were very menacing. And with the teeth, again, you've got this whole sort of evil but sort of hidden, like, what's this guy going to do? You don't know. He's very mysterious, but he's evil. I did notice, obviously, Corey Burton did the voice, or they did bring Corey Burton back from the Clone Wars to do the voice.
That just added to the level of authenticity to have, just that classic Cad Bane voice and the little sort of the sigh he does.
Yeah, his mannerisms were sort of very there, straight from the animation, right here into the sort of this prosthetic / CGI face. Probably mainly prosthetic, but a little bit computer generated. Absolutely fantastic. I think that's all I've got to say about the episode. To be honest with you, again, like I said, just fantastic Star Wars euphoria is how I would describe it. Sort of straight into your veins watching this episode. I don't really want to sort of. It's hard to see what's going to happen next episode because it's a bit like the past two episodes have been so unexpected but so good. It's like, just give me more of that. Give me more unexpected awesomeness. Happy with that.
Absolutely. It's just pure Star Wars serotonin right now.
Definitely. Well, Kat, I think that brings an end to the episode. Do you want to let the people know where they can find you on social media?
You can find me at Kat Kylo, both with K's, on Twitter. Always happy to talk Star Wars and anything Kylo Ren.
And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can find the podcast on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Star Wars Podcast. And you can find the podcast on Twitter at Boars Star. Thank you very much for listening, guys. May the Force be with you all. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.
Hello, Star Wars listeners. This is Savannah Odit. You might know me as host of The Dorky Diva Show with my co-host Brian Balance. I am also producer of The Adventures of the Zolan Dart, which is a Star Wars-inspired audio drama that we produced over the last year. If you love stories about smugglers, courage, heroic characters, and maybe a few foes along the way, you should go to thedorkydivashow.com and listen to The Adventures of the Zolan Dart today.
Shout! We've got your pigs.
Were any of the critters harmed?
What did you do now?
I didn't do anything. I just freaked out for no reason.
It was nice doing business with you again. Maybe next time we could deliver something less temperamental.
Now, what you call temperamental, I call fun.
Hey, is there a place nearby where I can make some repairs?
3 clicks south of here, you'll find a small spaceport. They should have what you need, as long as it's nothing too big.
Dynamic class? My stars, you don't hear about many of those still being space-worthy.
It's been in my family for a while.
She's pretty great. Any chance you have a hovercart we can use to load up?
I'll check out the HoloNet to see if anything new has come up in the sector.
My name is Sereth Khan. I am the chief here on Kamai. My people and I have been experiencing food shortages as of late due to unforeseen natural occurrences. We are looking to hire someone.
I say we take this one. The pay is great, and it's the type of job we're familiar with.
Welcome. You must be Captain Otoa. I've already sent word to Pack 2 to expect you in the next cycle or so.
You told him we were coming before we even accepted the job. That's rather presumptuous, isn't it?
Perhaps, though once I received confirmation that you were interested and on your way here, I couldn't help but hope.
Fair enough. Well, we'll be back as soon as we can.
Well, that's not good.
Is that blaster fire I hear?
So you're the one.
Captain, it sounds like they want to do this the hard way.
I love when they got some fight in them.
This is bad. This is bad. We're about to have a lot of company.
I'll see you soon.